I want to start by saying I'm not gay. I don't care if you are. I know it's a hot opinion. I'm making this video because I think a lot of Canadians don't realize that Canada, the same country that now plasters rainbow flags across cities all year, once persecuted people simply for being gay. The surprising part not being that it happened, it's how it happened. I like to think of this as Canada's Gaydar, or what it was actually called, the fruit machine. So why did they make it? It all started with the Cold War when fear of communists and spies ran deep. And honestly, they were right to be paranoid. Just not about the gay people. The government became convinced that gay people were a national security risk. They were told that they were morally weak, easily blackmailed, and more likely to leak government secrets if threatened. Kind of sounds absurd now. I mean, I can't even get a straight answer out of my gay friends, so let that be where it is. But at the time, the paranoia was taken very seriously, even scientifically. That's where the fruit machine came in. A psychological professor named Frank Robert Wake, and I cannot for the life of me find a picture of this guy. He's more in just the Canadian archives, and he was working with the Defense Research Board and tried to design a device that could detect homosexuality. It measured pupil dilation, pulse, sweat response, while showing subjects erotic images, men, women, and neutral visuals, all while pretending it was a standard stress test. The goal? To identify and remove anyone suspected of being gay from the RCMP, the military, and the federal public service. Between the 1950s and the 1990s, the government carried out what was known as the LGBT Purge. Thousands of Canadians, some estimates over $9,000, I can't say that right. Thousands of Canadians, some estimates over 9,000, were interrogated, followed, and forced out of their jobs simply because of their sexuality. Many were humiliated, lost their security clearances, were blacklisted from public service. RCMP agents kept detailed secret files on suspected homosexuals, sometimes watching bars, following people home, or even questioning friends and coworkers. One former civil servant described being taken into interrogation room, grilled about his personal life for hours, and then told, "You'll never work for the government again." I mean, that was Canada's idea of national security, which I don't know if much has honestly changed. Less about the gay aspect, but more about anyways, they ended up decriminalizing homosexuality in 1969. Then Justice Minister Pierre Trudeau decriminalized homosexuality with the famous line,
"There's no place for the state in the bedrooms of the nation," and I think that, what's done in private between adults doesn't concern the criminal code. When it becomes public, this is a different matter.
"There's no place for the state in the bedrooms of the nation." Honestly, that's a pretty good quote, but, here's the thing. Decriminalizing something doesn't really mean you're not going to be persecuted. Even though it was no longer illegal to be gay, the government and military still saw it as a moral and security threat. People were still fired, surveilled, and interrogated well into the 1990s. And then there was Operation Soap, which was a big thing that happened, and I didn't even honestly know about it until researching into this video. Operation Soap was in 1981. The Toronto police raided 4 gay bathhouses in a single night: the Barracks, the Club, the Romans, Second Health and Recreation Spa, and the Richmond Street Health Emporium. Nearly 300 men were arrested, one of the largest mass arrests in Canadian history, second only to the 1970 October crisis, another thing I've got to research into. Police smashed down doors with sledgehammers, verbally abused patrons, and damaged property. Some officers even made jokes and took photos with seized condoms and towels as evidence. Names of those arrested were printed in newspapers, outing them to a lot of their families and employers, which ruined tons of lives and reputations. The raids were justified under obscenity laws, but the real motive was to intimidate and shame Toronto's gay community. The police called it a cleanup operation, but the next day something changed. More than 3,000 people flooded the streets in protest, chanting "No more raids," marching from Yonge Street to Queen's Park. It was one of the biggest LGBTQ demonstrations in Canadian history. In the months that followed, protests and organizing efforts continued, and Pride Week grew into a massive annual event, transforming Toronto into one of the most prominent LGBTQ cities in the world. And it took a while for the government to give an apology. For decades afterwards, the government denied responsibility. Even after same-sex marriage became legal in 2005, survivors of the Purge were still waiting to be acknowledged. It took a class action lawsuit in 2016 to finally force the apology. And in 2017, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stood before Parliament and issued a formal apology. He said,
Mr. Speaker, today we acknowledge an often overlooked part of Canada's history. Today, we finally talk about Canada's role in the systemic oppression, criminalization, and violence against the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and two-spirit communities. And it is my hope that in talking about these injustices, in vowing to never repeat them, and acting to right these wrongs, we can begin to heal.
I mean, good on Trudeau for apologizing for something he never did, but, at least he apologized once. The Canadian government announced $145 million in compensation, and people could finally have their criminal records expunged. Like, imagine still having charges for something that was decriminalized decades ago. That's just crazy. Okay, I don't mean that. Okay, I don't mean that. It's not a fair comparison. Why did it take until 2017? Because no government wanted to admit that Canada, the tolerant progressive nation, was actually waging war against its own citizens in secret. It wasn't really just about bad policy. It was about identity, power, and denial. Today, one of the original fruit machine prototypes sits in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which it's not the actual fruit machine. Apparently, I was looking at a couple documentaries, watching this video, trying to research for this. But like, we only have the American one, and apparently, I'm probably going to play the clip, but apparently the Canadian one was a bit more advanced.
Canada wasn't the only country to build a so-called fruit machine. If you visit the new War Museum in Ottawa, you can find an American device on display. The Canadian version, which was probably destroyed, was more elaborate.
So apparently we were a little bit too deep in the Gaydar system, but like whatever. It's a strange looking piece of metal and wires. It's just something that once represented fear disguised as science. It's honestly just a reminder that progress isn't permanent, and that even a country built on peace and freedom can turn oppressive when fear takes over. And I think, the people targeted weren't dangerous. They were victims of a government that was scared kind of of its own shadow and somewhat other Soviet shadows, which technically was true, but persecuting people based on that is not necessarily a good idea. And honestly, I don't think governments have really changed that much in that aspect. Just the form has changed. Just referencing some of what the RCMP actually has said recently.
Well, radicalization in general quite often will show by people isolating themselves and changing their behavior, like changing what they're saying on a subject, like becoming more extremist. And if someone was very believed in equal gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards like traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist. But we also have to remember that having the most extremist views is perfectly legal in Canada, and that it's only acting with violence to prove that view that becomes a criminal offense.
But let me know what you think, because honestly, I'm very interested in this subject. It's something that I've had an opinion on for a long time, and it is, I think, a lot of the reason why our country talks about fucking LGBTQ stuff so much, and there's nothing wrong about that necessarily with the history in respects to this, because it's actually dedicated history. It's kind of a huge difference from way back then. And I mean, I've never really understood this, and I didn't really even know how bad it was until researching in this video and watching a documentary. And there is an actual really great documentary which you should check out, which is called The Fruit Machine, which is about an hour long. But they did a lot of interviews with people, and it's some of the footage that I used for this specific video as inspiration, because some of the lines and quotes that I was writing over is basically a lot of what they were saying. So I would 100% check it out, and it's way more detailed. Obviously, it's an hour long versus a 10-minute video, but I'm more interested in getting people interested into the subject matter of people being persecuted either because of their identity, politics, or whatever. And I think it is definitely a huge part of Canadian history, whether people like to think about it or not. I don't think the government likes to acknowledge it. I think they just like to say accept everybody, but you know, it is what it is. I don't know. I'm a little bit indifferent. I think everybody should, you know, just get along, stop focusing on this type of shit. But it is a period of history that sometimes we need to take a good look at. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think in the comments.